Major funding for these programs has been provided by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and M&T Bank, Geneva Burns, Giantomasi and Webster, Capital One Bank, the Wickoff Group, New York Community Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by grants from Aerial Property Advisors, AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, CUNY TV Foundation, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, First Nationwide Title Insurance Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, Herrick Feinstein, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman, USRealty.com, John Katsimides, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, New Banks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, People's United Bank, RBS Citizens Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, Urban American, and these friends.
So you walk around New York City, all you see are cranes, more cranes, cranes here, cranes there. Everywhere there's cranes. And it's not only in Manhattan, it's in Brooklyn, it's in Queens, it's in Staten Island, even in the Bronx. So what's happening in construction today, in residential development? I've assembled this group of distinguished leaders to provide their insight on what's happening in the residential market today in New York City. My guests, they include Miki Naftali, who's the chairman and the CEO of the Naftali Group. David von Spreckelsen, who is the president of Toll Brothers City Living New York City. Mick Walsdorf, who's the managing partner and co-founder of Flank. And last but not least, you can't build without having some money. So the man with the money, Mark Melchione, the administrative vice president, group manager of commercial real estate of M&T Bank. So, you've been through up cycles, down cycles, even though, it's misleading of how old you are, but we're going to make you feel bad. How do you see this period?
Well, I think in some ways it does feel like 2007. Certainly the development is all over New York City.
With regard to that, and maybe Mickey, who was very active developer during those periods, do you believe we have more inventory coming online today?
Relative to before the crash?
Yeah.
Not in the condo space. I wouldn't think that the inventory, in fact, there's probably more of a shortage of condos in New York City than there was before the crash, for sure.
But how do you look at the market? I mean, we're selling units today at some of the highest prices, right?
Correct, but the reality is that we don't have the inventory. It will take a few years to get to a point, definitely to the point of 2007. What I think is very interesting in the market is that I see two changes from 2007. The first is the demand is actually for bigger units, which is quite interesting. And when we say big, it's up to, obviously, to the upper scale is up to 10,000 square feet, but 4,000 square feet units today are so-called, no one is.
So what happened to the 500 square foot small studio? What happened to the livable place, when David was building first the property in Williamsburg? I mean, you were building studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms. The world has changed that much?
That was the market then, but like Mickey's saying, there's a lot less supply now. In 2007, we were taking on that project 450 units, 450 units for sale. You know, now it would take us 5 or 6, 7 buildings in different locations to get that many units. So people, I think, are being more prudent, at least right now. But I can't really explain the interest in bigger units other than that the city continues to be a great place to live, to work, to play, and people are staying with families, and they're coming in a big way. And we don't have a lot of buyers who are foreigners, pied-à-terre buyers. We have people who are families who want to live in the neighborhoods where we build. And we've been really concentrating in the last couple of years on supply-constrained neighborhoods in Manhattan and Brooklyn that are traditional residential neighborhoods. And I think you're always going to have buyers for those units. And now we're finding they want bigger and bigger square footages.
Mick, what are you seeing?
I would agree with what's been said. The challenge is getting to be, though, that the sites available in those neighborhoods are, the number of sites has shrunk for obvious reason, and the pricing is
Don't
off the
build more
charts.
land. I mean, we have a limitation on land. I mean, David at one time had the site in the Gowanus, okay, which was, you know, a variety of things, but the world changed over there. Do you see other areas? I mean, look, you've done in the West Village, okay? You've gone, right now you're working on a project in Mulberry Street. There are different neighborhoods. You know, if there was more land in the Upper West Side, you'd be buying all of it, or you could be competing with Gary, because the Upper West Side, there's such a lack of
There's absolutely no inventory in the Upper West Side. We just finished, we sold our 82nd Street project in 14 weeks, and we raised the price 5-6 times. We are building on 77th Street, an 18-story building. We are going to be with only 25 units. Those are very big units, but we are going to be the only building to deliver in 2015. There is no inventory. There are some neighborhoods with absolutely no inventory.
The question is, you know, people can buy something up to a point. True, there's a number of wealthy New Yorkers, and is what David was saying, and this has come out quite a bit. Most of these units aren't being bought. People believe, you know, that the Chinese investors and everyone else, but the units that are being sold in your buildings, they're all domestic investors. They're domestic people who are living there. There may be people who have upsized, you know, changed they wanted to leave the house in the suburbs or something like that, you know, or they want, you know, they're looking for different things. But so how hard is it to develop today?
Well, again, I think the opportunity, the land is really the issue, and sourcing of sites. Anything that's going to market right now is a nightmare. Anything that a troubled site or something with a complicated twist to it, something that can be done off market because a seller really has to focus on a party and get them through the hoops. That's probably your best opportunity. I agree with you. I don't think that the kind of mythic Chinese or other money is driving the downtown market. There are foreign buyers, but they're not. You couldn't categorize them. They're people from all over the place, and they will live there at least part of the year. And then, you know, below a certain price point, I mean, below kind of a very high price point, you're absolutely right. It's almost all New Yorkers who will live in the building.
So here's a question for the banker. In the days of 2006, 2007, people, when New York Times had ads in the New York Times, but people don't even look at the newspapers anymore for a condominium. The big question was, you know, people would say 421A tax abatement. You know, everybody said, oh, I'm not paying any taxes. I'll worry about 10 years from now, and so on. And that's how you would underwrite a loan, because there was a tax abatement which would help the buyer to reduce their combination taxes and their maintenance. How does the fact that there aren't tax abatements look at this as a banker?
Well, I think, you know, that game has changed, right? So I think the answer to most questions in this market is leverage. And so if you're going to underwrite a for-sale product in New York, you're going to start with the right sponsor, someone who's well capitalized, and you're going to make sure that...
Isn't it interesting that I have all your clients here and he doesn't need any money because he's
built for cash?
company,
It makes me cry. Yeah. So I think that's, you know, one of the disciplines that, you know, fortunately for the lending community that hasn't changed since 2008, is we're not really going up that leverage scale. And it's not one reason. It's 421A is probably one, but there are many reasons.
Well, certain members of your community are. You're not.
We're
You
not.
are,
but
we're not.
There are certain people in the community, and there are certain new players who believe that the streets of New York City are paved with gold,
Yeah.
like Fifth and Third Bank.
Well, the finance companies are back too. I mean, that's the other
Right.
high
So-
leverage.
So there are people, I
loans
mean,
are
there's
back.
Starwood, there are other people, mortgage REITs who are there. But you were saying something that you're going to be doing on one of your projects, which I think is very interesting and very valuable to explain to my viewers about the affordable condominiums.
Right. We bought a number of properties, and obviously 421A rules have changed, and we were looking at the sensitivity that people might have to taxes in certain locations, certain buildings. So we've done different things in different places, but we're trying our first one where we're doing on-site affordable housing for sale at 125% of AMI, where all the residents can be, the affordable residents can be in the base of the building, and then the whole building benefits obviously from the tax break. And it's a very serious tax break when you do it on site. It's 20-year tax break.
It's a 20-year tax abatement, full phase-in tax abatement over there.
Right.
But which is very important because how much are the taxes today for a new building? Because on a rental, that's why taxes are $24 a foot, would you say, on the average? So you're talking about, so if somebody is able to not pay that $24 a foot on a 1,000 square foot unit, let's say hypothetically, that's $24,000 a year, that's $2,000 a month in their monthly, and people look at what my monthly payment is.
Right. They can put it to the mortgage, and so that's our theory. But you know what we've seen though, since we opened for sale in Brooklyn Bridge Park, where we couldn't do an abatement because the pilot payment goes to the park. There are some buyers who are rather sensitive, and I think those are buyers who have historically lived in new construction where there's been an abatement, and they look at the difference, and it's almost 10 times. Your taxes are about 10 times what they are if it's not with the abatement, and they will say, no, I just can't even philosophically live somewhere where I have to pay those kind of taxes. But then you find people who have always been paying real estate taxes,
Then it's
and they don't even bat an eye.
But the reality is that going back to 2005, 6, 7, most of the projects, most of my project, we had 421A certificates. The reality today is this most for sale product,
Don't have it.
don't have it. So
So
the
the
buyers at the end
competition.
of the day, exactly. Now, interesting, even more than that, we were much more sensitive for what we call common charges back in 05, 06, 07. Now, some of the projects, I don't want to mention, but some of them are up to $3.50 a foot on common charges and real estate taxes. That's a lot. And still, they're selling very well. That's another thing. I mean, part of what we said about the change in the change in the demand is not only for size, but I think you will agree with me, it's also definitely on the quality and the amenity package. The reality is that we all need to deliver a very, very good product today that costs more money to build.
Here's a very interesting thing. I remember when I would do a show in 2006, 7, we could talk about the show that people would be buying from floor plans. Then in 2008, 2009, when the world changed, if you didn't have a model apartment where somebody could see it and they felt that you could finish the project, they were worried about it. In 2014, can you sell from floor plans, or do people want to see what's going on?
Even in the downturn, we sold from floor plans, and I think part of it is being a big publicly traded company with a brand name and everything. People were confident that we would finish projects, but we have never not sold from floor plans, and we continue to do it today. And we're not going to deliver in Brooklyn Bridge Park for about at least a year and a half.
So you don't
and
have
we're
a model
selling
apartment.
rapidly.
There's no model.
Oh, yeah.
You have a sales office that has the
Right,
vignettes.
the
but-
sales.
Sure.
Right, no model apartment.
Yeah.
The
No
goal
model
is to
apartment.
never have to get to the model apartment, because if you get that far, that
Right.
means you haven't sold out and your building's built.
Right. But but that's the reality today. And you can sell from, but you do need to build a very nice sales office and showcase your product.
Yeah, I mean, neighborhood is kind of key too. If there's limited supply in that neighborhood, people will absolutely buy off floor plan.
Here's the next question. For all of you in the banker, the neighborhoods have changed. We've gone to areas that we didn't think for sale projects would be built in. Certain parts of Brooklyn, 4th Avenue wasn't always, it was more of a rental market. The world has changed. Where do you see, because there are a number of sites available today in the Hudson Yards area, development sites, do you see possible major markets for the Hudson Yards, for Lower Manhattan today, for certain parts of Brooklyn and Queens? You know, would you ever, you know, Flushing, have you ever gone to Flushing? You know what it is? Okay.
Do you have a map?
Okay. You know, with Ophir Denny, I have to carry him over there. But so you originally started in Manhattan, now you're in Brooklyn. Do you see yourself going to, let's say, Greenpoint, to Bushwick, or other things?
We would consider it. We've looked at some Greenpoint sites. We haven't really found a good match yet, but you know, the Gowanus is something we've looked very hard at, and Hudson Square in Manhattan.
Hudson Square is different than Hudson Yards.
Different than Hudson Yards. The reason that both of those are appealing to us is, unlike some other locations where you're pushing further and further out or always to the edge, those are two neighborhoods, both with rezoning attached to the interest in them, that are truly infill at the city scale. I mean, there's great neighborhoods all around them, and they just, for zoning and other reasons, have not yet developed.
The Hudson Yards may be a couple of years from now in certain markets. I'm not sure, you know, even with the change of the Javits Center, even with Related's situation, because the Hudson Yards over there from Related and Brookfield are a specific neighborhood centric. It's a certain area. When people talk Hudson Yards, they then say, oh, 39th Street.
Right.
And 11th Avenue. 39th Street and 11th Avenue, to me, is still not a neighborhood.
Right.
Well, if you're talking about for sale product and not rental, because obviously a lot of rentals getting built.
I'm talking
Right.
about for sale.
For sale, you know, down the line, I think probably, but we tend to try to avoid areas where there's the potential for a lot to get built at once. And we learned that from Williamsburg when Jeff Levine right next to us built 575 units at one time, and we had a lot of price competition. So we've avoided Hudson Yards, avoided Lower Manhattan, where there's some sites where you could do some really super big buildings. And we wouldn't, at this point, go out to Bushwick. We've looked at Greenpoint, but again, there's the potential for thousands of
exactly.
units. You
Yeah.
know,
That's one of
Right.
that's
As
the
a
biggest
banker,
concern, right?
Exactly.
You cannot control how much inventory will come to market.
As a banker, I think that's an important point. How do you?
It is very important. Actually, I think that we tend to follow the smart developers who sort of echo some of the comments you've made about Hudson Yard, places in Brooklyn other than downtown Brooklyn.
But so here's another market which has enormous amount of, it was only originally rental, with the exception of you did one for sale, Long Island City. It was a total rental market.
Right.
You know, this wasn't a market that people would think of development. You did one, there were a couple. Today, sites in Long Island City are being sold at prices which we have never seen.
Correct.
Okay? And Long Island City still lacks certain amenities within the neighborhood. I mean, the best part of Long Island City is the train.
Yeah, sure.
But, you know, there's no supermarkets, there's no other amenities. What Rock Rose and TF Cornerstone did on their sites is they basically made self-contained retail to provide something, and schools and
Basics.
you know, over there. How do you look at Long Island City today? Because a lot of guys, and I know they've come to you, and the bank has looked at it in both positive and negative. How do you look at Long Island City?
Right, Long Island City, I think, is, again, you know, if you're Rock Rose or TF Cornerstone, you know, they've been together and separate known to develop neighborhoods from scratch. I think there are a lot of other developers following suit.
But now it's like everybody's saying, I want to be in Long Island City, and they don't realize it, especially since you worked in Long Island City. There's a difference in different neighborhoods.
Yeah, so the Hunters Point sort of sub-district where we did Fifth Street Lofts years ago is great. It's next to Vernon Boulevard, which is the sort of the strip there with restaurants and bars and everything. You're close to the water and the waterfront parks, but you can get quite far, you know, within a short distance, quite far removed from that kind of feel, because you got the industrial properties, you've got Queensbridge Houses, which is the largest housing project in the country, I guess probably the world. So we would really be careful about where we would go, and we haven't found a site that we would be interested in Long Island City in a number of years.
What about you, Mick?
We haven't looked. I mean, I think, you know, the same supply fears for us.
Right.
And the
We
scale
looked at
project we're doing.
different sites. We didn't find anything for sale. We looked at a few sites for rental. We like to build rental as well, but you know what? We didn't find the right site yet.
The negative of Coney Island over the years was that it's, as one would say, it's an hour commute. It's not a convenient commute into the city. But Coney Island does have water. You know, it's similar to Rockaways. It has water too. And both of these neighborhoods have really not done well. Any thoughts about the Rockaways? And I know you need a map for the Rockaways. David?
I think
You-
they have
you're
a
a
lot
Brooklyn
of
boy,
yeah. I think they have a lot of potential, but like you said, it's a real commute to Manhattan, and you have to be confident that you're going to be able to find enough people to buy in a location like that. And it has to be worth your going out there to build it, because I have a limited number of people, and if I'm sending people way out there, that's a whole afternoon or whatever to do stuff on site. So you need a big enough site so it's worth it, but not so big that you're afraid that you're not going to be able to sell everything you've got there.
It's very tough to be first.
Yeah, that
You know,
too.
we see most deals that happen in the marketplace, whether we do them or not. I don't have any view on Coney Island, and that should probably tell you all
Right.
you need to know.
But now let's go to the Garden State of New Jersey, where there are, as I was alluding at the beginning of this show about the number of cranes. If you go to Jersey City, there are probably 6,000 units on the different stages of construction. I know your company has developments in Jersey, more in the Hoboken.
A big rental in Jersey City we're doing.
Right, you're working on one. Have you looked at the Jersey market? And you live in Jersey, right? So you know.
That's about all I have to say about it.
Mick?
Oh, we haven't. I think, you know, we try to stay in the neighborhoods that we know and know well, and we just don't know the neighborhoods well. So for us to jump out of it, as you said, we have a limited amount of people and resources, attention span, and to spread out too far is too scary.
I heard Mark's feelings. Mickey?
We actually looked at a few sites for rental development in Jersey City. We are a little bit concerned about the supply. We think there's a lot coming to market. Having said that, with the Hudson Yard development, we do believe that it's a very easy commute, at least for mid-level type of administrative and so on and so forth. Rents are at the low 40s, which you can't find in almost anywhere in Brooklyn today in a decent building. So there is a good story over there, but we're a little bit concerned about the supply.
There's a lot of developments, you know, or planned developments in lower Manhattan, not Hudson Square. We're talking, you know, Woodcoff is doing 101 Murray,
Right.
and they're selling the Fame site. There are a couple of other sites over there. There are a couple ideas in the Seaport, which has, because of the type of architecture that you like something, you know, you like taking some old properties. Have you looked at lower Manhattan today, both over there and as a banker and so on?
Well, we have a development in 33 Beekman, which is, we are building a 34-story tower, but we found actually a very good user.
Yeah.
So
Right,
the building's
but that's
still-
a different case.
correct. But you know what?
That's student housing.
You're absolutely right. But at the same time, I would build a rental over there, and you know, our basis in the land would allow us to build rental. But
When you bought it, but not
Correct.
today. The basis of the land has gone up substantially.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it changes. What's your thought as a banker?
So historically, you know, M&T hasn't really invested in downtown. That's changed though, and I think that's because downtown has changed, right? Since 9/11, museums opening.
Have you looked at it?
Yeah, we do look, and we've sniffed around a couple sites. The issue for us has been on those, not that they weren't good sites, but they're not rental basis anymore. So you don't have that to fall back on. And our feeling is, and the reason we passed was the elasticity just seemed, it didn't seem like it was there. It seemed like you could do a nice project, but if you really did a great project, you may not get rewarded the way that you could in other neighborhoods. And so, we haven't.
David?
Yeah, I couldn't name one successful condo project in Lower Manhattan, so that scared us off for a while. And now it's just, there is the potential for there to be a lot of development in a short period of time there. And so, again, it's an area that we avoid.
So now let's go to a little different section. There was, and there haven't been really successful condo developments up in Harlem. The Fifth on the Park was a failure, partially because of the developer and everything. Harlem, and there's been talk about Inwood. There are a couple of developments. Any thoughts about those markets? Or are you not allowed to pass night?
I prefer to stay in Upper West Side, Chelsea, Tribeca, the West Village, Upper East Side. It's going back to demand and inventory. So,
but I mean, you have certain the trains, the subways to Harlem are excellent. To East and West Harlem. You have the Lexington train on East Harlem, and you have the other trains going to West Harlem. And Columbia, the expansion of Columbia University is enormous. And Inwood, when you go to Inwood and Washington Heights, you have the biggest employers being Columbia Presbyterian. So there's employers over there, and there's a need for housing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely potential there, but right now there's no shortage of good sites that are on the market below 96th Street, and we've been focusing on those where
The
in
only
the end
thing
there's
is
a lot
nobody
less
can afford to buy these sites. I mean, I
We
remember
still
when
can.
sites were selling at prices 200, 300. Now there's an extra digit over there. There's
Right,
an
but do you
extra zero
go
in, right?
go uptown and take a risk that there's a
Right.
blip in the market and that the product that's going to sell is in the more traditional residential neighborhoods below 96th Street.
You
Well,
believe,
An elasticity problem
Again.
potentially again, which is that you could do well. I mean, we've been fascinated since our practice kind of came out of Columbia in a way, and the area trapped by Morningside Park and Central Park, and I mean trapped in a very good way, with the express train coming through and so forth. So basically at the bottom of Morningside Park, that it is nice now and nicer than it used to be, should be and will be at some point fantastic. We've been talking about it for 10 years and never did anything about it because the projects are too
look,
small.
You know what? In
The
reality,
elasticity isn't there.
the two developments that were built close to the initial part of Harlem was the Athena project on the park, which did okay at that time, but the other project, which was built right on the corner, which was the Brickman development, was not good and didn't work out. But to accomplish all this in a half an hour to discussion, there's never enough time. So I promise that before the season is over this year, I hope to have all of you back, and I'd like your views. It's happy that we had a good banker over here. Unfortunately, you don't want to use him because you don't need him. But I'd
Maybe
like
soon.
Okay, one day. I'd
me
like
your
to
card.
thank Mickey, David, Mick, and Mark, and I'll see you next week.